The case that I will be examining is California versus Menendez. So why did I choose this case? So this case stood out to me because of the interesting relationships between the criminal and the victims. So this case involved a family, which is not seen very, very often, and it also made it more difficult for the juries to come to a decision. There was also a mix of organized and disorganized crime in there. There were parts that were planned out, but there were also a lot of parts that weren't, and again, it made for a more difficult decision with the jurors. And this case is not just black and white. There are deeper issues at heart, which I will get into later. So what happened? So the events of the crime. So on August 20th of 1989, Lyle and Eric Menendez shoot their parents, Kitty and Jose Menendez. They dumped their shotguns on Mulholland Drive and then bought tickets at their local movie theater to gain an alibi. After they got home, Lyle called the police and claimed that, quote, somebody killed my parents. So a few months later, Eric then confessed to his psychotherapist, Dr. L. Jerome Ozio. His therapist then shared it with his mistress, who then shared it with the police. Lyle and Eric were then arrested in March of 1990. So in summer of 1993, the trial of the Menendez brothers began and was broadcasted nationally. So they were each charged with one count of first-degree murder for Kitty Menendez and one count of first-degree murder for Jose Menendez. So the prosecutioner was Pamela Bosniak. So to summarize her opening statement, she basically wanted to prove that the murder was planned, that they used false identification to purchase the shotguns, set up an alibi, acquired ammunition, and then repeated the alibi to the police. She also wanted to prove that this crime was money motivated and that it was unlawful, unjust, and wholly premeditated. So this links to classical theory because despite the abuse they endured, which I will get into later, it was their choice to kill their parents. So although it was never explicitly stated, we can infer that they compared the cost of the crime to the benefits. So the costs include living without parents or any parental guidance, and if they were to get caught, they would go to jail. But the benefits included no longer having to deal with sexual and physical abuse, and if they didn't kill their parents, the Menendez brothers were sure that their parents were going to kill them first. So to the Menendez brothers, the benefits outweighed the costs, and so they went through with the murder. So the prosecutor evidence. So the first piece of evidence was expert testimony. So they called on the officers who were at the scene of the crime to basically explain to the jurors what it looked like. So they said that there was lots of blood on and around the body, and a part of his head was missing, referring to Jose Menendez. They also called on the medical examiner to determine how exactly Kitty and Jose Menendez died, and they determined that the cause of death was multiple shotgun wounds. So essentially, they just wanted to kind of appeal to emotion in a way and also appeal to logic because it's really hard to just ignore what's right in front of you. Then there was the 911 call. So the Menendez brothers basically lied to the officers responding to the call, which weakened their credibility and allowed for the prosecutioner to accuse Lyle of being a sociopath. And then there was Perry Scott Berman, who was an old friend and tennis coach of the brothers. So there was a phone call that afternoon prior to the shooting. So Lyle wanted to get together, but Perry had plans to go to the Taste of LA, which is essentially a festival. And Lyle said that he had plans to go with Eric to see the new Batman movie. So they agreed that they would meet at the festival at 9:30 p.m. Now, they never met up, but Lyle called Perry and claimed that he was there at 10 to 10:15. So the main evidence was the recorded confession from Eric Menendez to his psychotherapist, Dr. L. Jerome Ozio. So in Ozio's words, Eric felt an urge to commit the murder fast, or he would lose that emotional ability to go through with it, whereas Lyle wanted to take the time to plan it out. He then explained the events that occurred at the crime scene. So the father was shot first, and then he died first. They went outside to reload the shotguns, while the mother was on the floor moaning and trying to crawl. And then Eric claimed that they killed their parents out of hatred, particularly with their father. So their mother was more of a witness, kind of like you can't kill one and leave the other. Now this is important because nowhere in that confession did they claim to kill their parents in self-defense. So the defense is Leslie Abramson and Jill Lanson. So to summarize their opening statement, they basically said that Eric Menendez was the abused son of wealthy parents, and he killed his parents because he could no longer endure that abuse. So he put himself in mortal danger when he sensed that danger was imminent, and his instinct to survive took over. So they're looking to prove that the crime was not done for money. It was not done to commit the perfect crime. It was possibly done out of hatred, but mostly it was done out of fear. So their first piece of evidence is credibility. So Abramson convinced the jury that Oziel was not a credible witness because of his affair with Judalon Smith and because of the lawsuit she filed against him. So next is the multiple witnesses. So all these witnesses testified to the abuse and neglect both these children faced. So their father would grab him by the shoulders and hold Eric in between his knees. There were belts and they saw bruises up their thighs. A doctor actually examined Eric's throat and said that the injury could be due to oral copulation, and the brothers even confided into their cousins about the sexual abuse. Now, the main piece of evidence is their own testimony. So they killed their parents because they were afraid. The sexual abuse started after sports practices and included massaging, fondling, undressing, oral sex, and anal penetration and rape. So they claimed that the mother said that he was exaggerating. The father said that it was our secret and bad things would happen to you if you told anybody, and that we should just keep it between us or he would kill me. So this links to socialization theory. So this theory states that key influences leading to criminal behavior are found in upbringing, peer groups, and role models. So in this case, their father and their mother influenced their criminal behavior. They sexually and physically abused their children and manipulated them into not telling anyone. So because this abuse was so normalized, the Menendez brothers' first thought was to kill their parents. So they could have gone to the police, gone to their therapist or anybody else for help, but instead they chose to fight fire with fire because they thought that was the only way out. Now the jury decision. So the judge decided that there was no reasonable reason that they would have feared their parents under the circumstances that the brothers described. So essentially, the judge ruled out perfect self-defense. So 3 weeks later, they deemed a mistrial. And 4 years later, when they were tried a second time, they were convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as a conspiracy to commit murder. They were then sentenced to life in prison without parole. So now I want to know what your thoughts on this case are. Do you believe that they were abused as children? And if so, do you believe that the abuse excuses their actions? And lastly, do you think that this sentence was fair? Why or why not? This is My Works Cited, and thank you for listening.